Webb. Unbelievable twists and turns in this story. Unbelievable twists and turns of the origins of COVID. The blood that's coming from China, Michael Callahan, 6,000 blood vials coming into Long Island, coming into Northwell, coming into this Cassetta family, three different DARPA people. DARPA, hundreds and hundreds of patents, not just AI for the woman who supposedly kills her baby, then kills herself, but then also the husband has hundreds and hundreds of patents, all Chinese guys living in Malibu. And he's from GM at the Tank Command Center, the TACOM, where we've taken you many times in Warren, Michigan. So it's crazy. And this is the outbreak, supposedly, of remdesivir. This is the study that proves we need remdesivir. We can't use hydroxychloroquine. This is the domain study. You can't use HEQ. You can't use ivermectin. And this is also the study that puts in remdesivir. This is the Northwell study. This is the same person, Melissa Prober, who has the 9/11 hijack firemen, and the widows don't get any money and the kids don't get any money. It all goes to Melissa Prober, same person, same DARPA person, same DARPA lawyer. She's married to a Pfizer executive. She's involved in something called Pfizer Ventures. It's a tangle. DARPA everywhere you look. Remdesivir purchase orders in January. Blood vials in January. People coming and going with blood vials from China in January. It's an amazing story. Check it out on my Substack. Check it out also on my Twitter. There is more to this story.
Hello, welcome to Neighborhood News. George Webb investigates. Hey, George, there is more to the story. It is a heck of a story.
Hey, George.
Hey, Mark, how are you? Hey, Aaron.
Hey.
This is a story about Northwell. And when I say the word Northwell, what happens is people go, I don't know anything about Northwell. That doesn't mean anything to me. Northwell is the study that gets us remdesivir. Northwell is the reason that we don't get ivermectin. Northwell is the reason we don't get hydroxychloroquine. Northwell is the study where Fauci says, hey, I got this paper here from the Boston Consulting Group. It's written by a guy named Jordan Walker. He's not a doctor. He's never spent any time in virology ever. But because it says Jordan Walker on it, we're going to make this thing the standard of care still to this day around the world. Now, how could that possibly be if it's not state sponsored, right? How could that possibly be true? So the Northwell study, supposedly Bob Malone runs this thing. It's the domain study. Had to be gamed, had to be rigged, had to be fixed, right? And you're like, oh, come on, George. How could the Northwell study be traveled? Now, James O'Keefe has a video out today, which has all the same players, but it's not about Jordan Walker. Jordan Walker's in here, but it's not about the Northwell study. It's about
He doesn't know about the Northwell study.
James, it's not about the North. He doesn't cover that.
James doesn't know about the Northwell study, or we'd be surprised if he did, right?
He does mention Northwell.
Okay.
He mentions he travels Northwell from New York via helicopter to the uppermost part of Maine. And that's just perfectly okay to go get a check from a donor. He's also traveling with the private jets. I don't care. If James goes on private jets and gets checks, I don't care. I don't care if he goes on helicopters at Northwell and gets checks on a helicopter. I don't care. What I want to see James do is come back to the original story he broke, right, which is about Jordan Walker and about remdesivir, and I want him to cover the Northwell study. And then I said 2 years ago, there's this suspicious death of this woman. There's a suspicious death of this baby. And then now we find the guy who has the Northwell blood, right? He's the collector of all the blood for the Northwell study. He died a month after his daughter supposedly committed suicide and shot her baby. So there's a lot of blood on the floor here. right? And so when I see blood all over the floor at a critical time, just like Suchir Balaji, when the AI market is in flux, right, and the last place immediately all of a sudden wins the race amongst all these billionaires, and the guy who was murdered is doing an AI training drive, right? This is the same sort of thing. The world is looking in on this, and they're making a decision of, is it going to be HCQ or ivermectin, or is it going to be remdesivir? And then everybody's murdered.
And this occurred in August of 2023. I think a lot of us recall it happening in the news. You know, another story that just was coming through there. And remdesivir, you know, run death is near, killing people in the hospitals has already happened. You know, so we're a ways through COVID now, and what we're hypothesizing here is that the Calcaterra, is it Calcetta? Is not, what is
Calcetta?
The Calcetta family.
Cassetta, like a cassette tape. Like you play a cassetta in Italy, you play a cassette in America, but you play a cassetta in Italy.
Kassetta, right? So like they maybe, you know, are just talk about the wrong place at the wrong time. I mean, we're not saying they're in on it or they know anything or anything like that. More so that now that the chips have fallen and remdesivir has done what it's done, and the blood studies have concluded that they may be coming to these conclusions through their practice, through their medical practice, and seeing, you know, the evidence now playing out before us. And you know, the deep state, or the medical deep state, whoever it could have been, you know, quite possibly may be involved in a homicide here, rather than what it's being branded as a postpartum depression murder suicide.
And now they're saying the father dying a month later, he's got postpartum depression too.
I'm sure. Well, I talk about a broken heart. I mean,
sure, but I mean, he's the guy. And what did we say when the story first broke with Bob Malone? Here's a guy who ran the Northwell study, right, for the Defense Threat Reduction Agency. Okay. Then he says, I didn't talk to Michael Callahan at all in Wuhan. Michael Callahan's been doing studies on remdesivir for 10 years, right? They tried it for everything in China. They tried it for Ebola. They tried it for Marburg. They tried it for hepatitis. They tried it for malaria. They tried it for everything. It failed in everything. So finally, they did a monkey trial. So the monkeys can't come back and say it didn't work, right? Which was barely successful. The same person who framed Bruce Ivans, the monkey gal, the monkey lady who framed Bruce Ivans, is the only evidence we have that remdesivir is effective. And again, we're going on monkeys here now. We couldn't find anything that it was effective for against humans. And then that's when it's launched. No thinking person would recommend this product after 4 or 5 failed trials. And what Bob Malone says, remember Michael Callahan's Rolling Stone, here it is. He swims across the Yangtze, or he makes a James Bond escape out of China with 6,000 vials of blood. Right? Mm-hmm. And then all of a sudden, Jordan Walker in April is done. We're done with the studies. We're done with the tests. Remdesivir worked. Right? What?
Yep.
It failed for 10 years. And Bob Malone had the brilliant idea of pairing remdesivir with famotidine, Pepsid AC. Well, isn't that interesting? Because Michael Callahan found in Wuhan, in all of his studies, that we better pair this with famotidine because everybody's getting up heartburn over this, right? So Bob Malone, he's communicating with Michael Callahan all up until the minute that they talked about famotidine. Bob Malone didn't get famotidine from Michael Callahan, so says Bob Malone. He came about that by himself to pair famotidine with remdesivir. To me, it looks like a rigged, fixed, gained study to get remdesivir in, just like DARPA Adept to get mRNA.
And
George, wasn't the need for the ventilators when we needed ventilators and they created them? Wasn't the remdesivir treatment the reason why you had to have the ventilators?
Well,
Up
low
there,
oxygen's why you had the ventilator, but what they found was remdesivir would accelerate how the virus genetically morphed. So you could accelerate it if you had a ventilator and you were rebreathing your own viral particles, your own virons. You would accelerate. You would direct evolution. You would accelerate how fast your the coronavirus genetically modified itself.
Because I remember, and I can't remember who it was, but it was like one of the people that was covering this that I might even have been you. I can't, but the remdesivir and the ventilator was like within 5 days you would be dead because
Yes,
of
yes.
like the pneumonia. But that that was you could that's why it was like 5 days was the longest they could treat you because you would be dead in 6 or something like that.
Yeah. When they originally got the approval, they pulled the plug because they basically took all the people that died and dropped them out of the study, right? And then they said, well, we reduced the way they justified it in the Northwell study is we reduced hospital days for the cohort that had to stay more than 7 days. So if you live more than 7 days, it reduced your hospital stays. But even those numbers were rigged, right? The only real study that really was in favor of remdesivir was this monkey study done by Nancy, what's her name?
Hagewood?
From Hagewood. Yeah, that was the monkey studies.
Yeah.
And again, she appears out of nowhere. We need to have somebody accuse Bruce Ivans that wet anthrax is weaponized. Everyone knows dry anthrax that Stephen Hatfield has is weaponized. Bring in Nancy Hagewood. They must have something on Nancy Hagewood bad. Bring in Nancy Hagewood. Here again, we need to have this dog product that they've tried for 10 years in Michael Callahan, the CIA guy in Wuhan for 10 years. It won't work on anything. Bring in Nancy Hagewood, bring in the monkeys.
Yeah, let's see. At the Dr. Nancy Hagewood again emphasizes once I am on site, partly because photos can be shared easily and taken out of context. We had well, hold on. This is the wrong part of the article. Sorry. There it is in here where they talk about the monkeys, 1,600 monkeys. This is an article
But
here.
see, monkeys can't say I have heartburn, right?
Mhm.
Monkeys can't say I have cancer. Monkeys can't say I have miscarriages, right? Monkeys can't speak for themselves. Monkeys just are there. But humans go, hey, my sex life screwed up, or hey, I'm throwing up every morning, or hey, I can't, my heart feels like it has an anvil on its chest, or whatever. Humans kick back all these side effects. And what you saw by Michael Callahan in order to get remdesivir slammed in, what you saw him doing was pairing this with a Pepsid AC, a very strong version, an intravenous version. When you take Pepsid AC after a big barbecue, after a big Thanksgiving meal, you take the tablets, right? No, you don't see somebody getting out their hypodermic needle and then shooting up with remdesivir. And I'm saying this was intravenous Pepsid AC. This is like a Pepsid AC junkie would shoot. Go ahead, Mark. I'm sorry.
Well, the Pepsid AC, this reminds me of my Aunt Gladys, she died, 25 years ago, whatever. But she'd been going to the doctor, okay, because she was having heartburn. Okay. And so they were, Pepsid AC and these kinds of things. Come to find out, okay, she had 6 blockages in her heart. Okay. And that was kind of really, it wasn't like indigestion from the stomach, but it was these blockages in her heart. They were able to repair 2 of them, but she died from the damage because they're just too much of the heart had been damaged. And it wasn't until the heart was, beyond repair that, she had gotten surgery on it. But I just wondered if this indigestion or whatever could have been the heart.
Well, I'm not a doctor, and
Just-
I don't play one on TV, but I will throw out a what I believe happens in a lot of cases. First of all, cardiologists should never be dance majors as their undergraduate degree. Jordan Walkers should not be cardiologists. You don't want a dance major as your doctor when you're trying to live. Okay. You want somebody who's working in anatomy or biochemistry and really knows their science. But the body makes a reaction, and there's some kind of infection going on or some kind of thing going on, and the body makes a reaction. And the first responders are these, we talked about yesterday, these neutrophils. And that's like, the shock troops, the firemen, the first to the scene. And what can happen is that your body's fighting this infection, and because you're not getting to maybe she had heart disease, or maybe she had some kind of, we don't know, but you can get these little like collection glumps. The attacker goes after the thing and and walls it off into a little glump, but you want to clear that shit out of the system, out of the blood. And if your kidneys aren't working right, or your liver isn't working right, it blocks, it accumulates and sticks in the critical parts of the heart. This is the same thing that happens with fat, right? And a bad diet. So I don't have her heart study in front of me, but what I'm saying is that it's, when you give somebody famotidine and Pepcid AC, it just masks the problem. It masks the pain. The pain is the signal to say, hey, stop worrying about being a dance major and start doing your biochemistry and figure out what's wrong, because she probably, had some kind of imbalance that caused a buildup in her heart. But Pepcid AC, my point is not curing anything. It's just masking the symptoms so that and intravenous Pepcid AC, right, which is it was like 6 to 10 times what you would get in a normal dose. It was deliberately done to jam in, to fix, to rig, to game the system so that they could jam through remdesivir.
So this is an article from July of 2020. This is, another one of these famous metadata points. This is an AP article that has been reviewed and referenced 1,000 times at this point. And this is the one. This is where Robert Malone first pops on the scene. Pepcid as a virus remedy. Trump admin's $21 million gamble fizzled. And this is where they kind of, the MSM in a way tries to make Bob Malone look bad, or tries to make Trump look bad vis-a-vis Bob Malone in this. But I want to read here because this is kind of, where the Northwell study first makes its appearance.
Great.
And we didn't know that back then. I mean, we all read the article. And, there's just so, we know it was in there, but little did we know, that there would be so much importance to the Northwell study so many years later. So I'll just read through here a few paragraphs and just stop me whenever you want. Can we see it on screen here? I think the audience can see what I'm reading.
Yeah, we can see it. And when you get a chance, Aaron, snap your fingers by your face so the camera focuses on your face.
Oh, yeah. Like that? Yeah. It's a trick.
There you go. Thank you. Yeah.
Did that work? All right, good. All right, so this is just from the middle of the article here. The fast-moving Pepcid proposal, however, snared the interest of HHS senior leadership, including Secretary Alex Azar, according to the internal emails. Scientifically, the government had very little data on which to base a funding decision about Pepcid and COVID-19. There was no specific research on famotidin's coronavirus fighting potential to underpin a clinical trial involving hundreds of COVID-19 patients. Cadlick, that's Robert Cadlick. We all know Robert Cadlick, or some should, I guess, right? Cadlick had only Callahan's anecdotal experience with the heartburn drug in Wuhan, and Malone's computer modeling results, which indicated famotidine might work against the virus. And Northwell's work with Pepsid was at too early a stage to provide meaningful data for a trial. So Northwell it's Malone and Callahan back and forth with their hearsay evidence, or I guess Callahan's is hearsay, Malone's is domain, beep, 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 boop, 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 computer output modeling. And
That's
Malone,
bullshit.
of course, says that he took it himself too. That's part of his story, right? But
Well, the fact, I mean, Malone's saying he didn't get it from Callahan. He sure as hell did get it from Callahan. Callahan was saying everybody, they're puking up their guts and their throats burning like it's being ripped from their skull, right? So that's why they're given intravenous famotidine. Nobody runs out and starts saying, hey, you know what? I got a great idea. I'll just pick something off the shelf at random in the supermarket and then increase the dosage 10 times and start shooting all the patients with it because I have a hunch. That's ridiculous.
Mhm.
He got that from Callahan in Wuhan. Now, where this computer modeling thing is, that's even stupider because he's saying literally a graduate student in Canada working for lens crafters using a software that's used to grind lenses for people in their glasses, right? Is how he did the X-ray crystallography on the spike and found out that the lock and key would be good from famotidine.
And that's
which it isn't. There isn't a good lock and key mix between famotidine. So if the kid is a genius or very good at grinding lenses, he's horrible at figuring out the domain lock and key mechanism for the regional binding domain in the virus. So there's a lot better chance. You get a recommendation from LensCrafter at the most important time in human history, medical history, or you get somebody who's been testing this thing 10 years. Remember, they've been going through spikes in Wuhan for 10 years with Callahan. 10 years of bat spikes have been tried, okay? And then the final one for the live exercise was coming your way. Now, my fundamental thesis here that I have not proven was they wanted to jam it in. They wanted to fix it. They wanted to rig it. They wanted to game it, right? And there's anecdotal proof there because Rick Bright, who's working for Bob Cadillac, ordered a shit ton of remdesivir in January 2020. Now, the Northwell study supposedly isn't until April. So the only thing that they could have gone on for ordering so much remdesivir is that it was working in Wuhan. Or they were trying to jam it through because they've been trying to jam it through for 10 years for Gilead and Donald Rumsfeld. And the reason why they went with famotidine is to mask so they could get it approved, so they could get it FDA approval.
This is the Rick Bright. Rick Bright, of course, was a whistleblower over this. They always try to make themselves the victim. They always try to make themselves the victim, and then he was removed from his leadership position. Hand wringing and whatever. But let me continue that article there because the next article, the next paragraph was where the juice was. Oh no, are they gonna cut me off from this? Excuse me. Sorry. All right. And Northwell's work with Pepsid was at too early a stage to provide meaningful data for a trial. The healthcare provider had just begun drafting plans for studying famotidine when Cadillac contacted them, according to dates provided by Northwell. Within days, Northwell would team up with Malone's employer, Alchem Laboratories, to study the heartburn drug's potential as a COVID-19 therapy. So there you have Alchem and Northwell hand in hand. Which
can I say something on this?
Yeah, there you go.
Alchem, Bob Malone had come out with in January. They went back and backdated it later. He'd come out with an extensive scientific study talking about antibody-dependent enhancement at Alchem. Antibody-dependent enhancement is a complete analysis, 68-page scientific paper of complete analysis on side effects. Now, if he's just coming up with the idea and he was walking through the supermarket and he said, hey, this looks like a cure for coronavirus, I'll increase the dosage by 10 and I'll start shooting it into all the corona patients, right?
Mhm.
He either came about it that way through the LensCrafter guy in Canada, or he said, hey, I've got a paper that's already written here by Michael Callahan and a whole bunch of Chinese folks over 10 years. And here it describes exactly what antibody enhancement is. I'll take the Chinese people's name off of it. I'll put my name on it, and then I'll send it out. And that's exactly what happened, right? They knew that there was the whole idea of designing a weapon system is that you have a workaround, that you don't go through the defenses of the bioagent. You attack the easiest way to neutralize or have a countermeasure. And that's what antibody dependent enhancement is. It sounds like the stupidest euphemism that anyone could ever think of, because even professionals get confused when they hear antibody dependent enhancement. But at the end of the day, it's a quick countermeasure to get around the enemy with all this complication on the outside of the virus. You just go right to the stalk and you cut it off at the stalk with ADE. And Bob Malone knew that in January of 2020, meaning that he had prior knowledge. He had prior knowledge with Alchem. Alchem is all these bioweapons engineers from the old Soviet Union and Ukraine, right? They had written the paper on this, right?
Mhm.
20 years ago, they knew all about ADE. That's where Bob was getting his information at Alchem.
And the only kind of person who could stand in his way would be a blood bank technologist.
Well, you put a father-daughter combination together. Vincent Cassetta was the guy who got the blood. I say the 6,000 blood samples to get this thing through came from Michael Callahan from Wuhan.
Why does it have to be the Wuhan blood? Because why does it have to be the Chinese people even?
Because Jordan Walker's got to perform some kind of blood analysis, right? And Jordan Walker's using the Harvard's facility, which is Massachusetts General Hospital. He's using Boston. He's not doing it himself. The various people we've identified are working with with Jordan Walker, but you have to have some kind of analysis. But what I'm saying is the dates don't jive. In order for Jordan Walker to write the white paper, right, in April, that means he's already got data. He's already got blood, right? He's already been able to do some type of blood analysis. Now, Jordan Walker does have some lab skills. He was a urologist. So he can look at things in the blood and go, hey, the antibody for coronavirus is here. And other things. He can analyze the blood for how is this going to work with, most of the folks in Asia are type O blood, right? We, as Indo-Europeans, Cherokee Europeans, we have A and B blood as well. So there's potential that it could be different. Show Jordan Walker's signature on this.
This is the near-term outlook for COVID-19 therapeutic treatments. Jordan Walker's named third. He was, of course, the one that he was the one that went on the date or the secret date or whatever those things James O'Keefe does when he entraps people at restaurants with
James can't say we didn't share this with him. James can't say this is why Project Veritas got so angry with James. I gave this to James live in front of 14,000 people. James tweeted the 5 pages of the Jordan Walker study out live. They had the most successful 50 million views story in the history of Project Veritas. James tweets this out. He's fired the next day, practically, or they're starting to build a case against him the next day. They spend all week in the boardroom at Project Veritas building a case against James, saying, hey, James took the helicopter to Maine. James took the black cars, that are super expensive, for 50 miles or 100 miles. James took the private jet to go get so they're building this case against James. James stayed in the luxury suites when we all stayed in Motel 6, right? They're spending all week getting dirt on James so that at the end of the week, they're going to fire O'Keefe. And then O'Keefe talks about this now today. We've reported on this, but today is when O'Keefe has come out now and this information now is available.
Here, I'll read a little from this Boston Consulting Group paper written by Jordan Walker. While we await, the U.S. Food and Drug Administration has issued a warning advising against the use of chloroquine and hydroxychloroquine outside of clinical trials. Remdesivir, this intravenous drug from Gilead Sciences, which has received a lot of public attention recently, was developed in 2015 as a possible treatment for Ebola. Remdesivir was identified by Gilead as a potential treatment for COVID-19 following a screening effort across the company's portfolio of antiviral drugs. Gilead quickly established clinical trials in January at multiple sites around the world to assess its potential. On April 29th, investigators announced interim results from a global placebo-controlled trial sponsored by the NIAID, which demonstrated that remdesivir shortened the time to clinical recovery from a median of 15 days in the control group to 11 days in the group receiving the drug. By reducing lengthy inpatient care, this could help hospitals better manage capacity. Also on April 29th, the FDA moved to authorize emergency use of remdesivir. None of that seems all that exciting in a sense. It's almost like they just needed this.
Well, you can see how
over,
they're trying to knock down hydroxychloroquine. I don't know if they mention ivermectin, if Walker mentions ivermectin in that paper.
We'll do a puppy paw F here and give it a look. No, doesn't appear that there is any ivermectin mentioned in this.
Okay, and Trump was talking in February about hydroxychloroquine.
Mm-hmm.
So this is aimed at Trump. This is a BCG paper to come out and knock out. See this promising early results in China.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you think the blood for these conclusions come from? The blood from these 6,000 samples that Michael Callahan took, promising early results from China.
This is a convalescent plasma.
Well, yeah, they tried 5 different things.
Trying to just dwell on the graphics here. I haven't gone.
Yeah, but interferon. But they say that this is where they got the blood from for this trial, for this paper.
Mm-hmm.
Jordan Walker's taking Chinese lessons. Jordan Walker's a part of this study, right? He's a part of looking at the Michael Callahan's 6,000 blood samples.
Mm-hmm.
And this is where they come about, and this is the indication they give to Cadillac, supposedly. This is why Rick Bright orders the what did he order? Like 200,000 vials of this stuff,
as much as needed to exhaust the supply.
Yeah, exactly. So that they had to pay, 10 times the price when Cadillac had to go back and buy it. So that's my point here is we'd never had a triple murder with this before, right? Up until a couple of days ago when I went back to this old story, and I'm just reviewing my old stories and updating them, I didn't really, I said the double murder, but I didn't know exactly I couldn't connect the double murder of the woman and the baby. I couldn't connect it to the Northwell study. Well, Frau Hodel sent me the thing and said, hey, her father is the Northwell study. Her father is the one who got the blood. Oops, it's a triple murder. And she also says, oh, and he died a month later. Oops, it's a triple murder now around this Northwell study. So this is what I wanted James to get back to. I don't care if he takes the helicopter to Maine. I don't care. He was taking the private jet to Wisconsin to get checks. He was taking the black cars, for 120 miles to Albany from the LaGuardia. I don't care. If that's how they think if he stays in the King Saud suite when they travel and everybody else is in Motel 6, I mean, I kind of care because it's money, because he says citizen journalism. But I really want him to get back to this study, which is the Northwell study, because that's his story. Jordan Walker's his story. Yeah.
Getting a little hiccup in the internet. You got on screen here, Frau Hodel. Shout out to the great researcher, international researcher, Frau Hodel. She's got 17,000 followers on Twitter. I remember when that was down in the single digits, so she's really cranking it out there. Great follow on Twitter if you do not follow Frau Hodel. But yeah, did you want to watch James's video here today?
Sure. Yeah. Let's play a little bit of it. And you see how he avoids Jordan Walker and remdesivir. See how many times he says Jordan Walker and remdesivir. Go ahead.
I don't think I
get a calculator, get a tote board, get something that you can quickly tap to count the number of times he says Jordan Walker and remdesivir.
It's going to be over under 1 or 0, I'm guessing. I haven't watched this yet here. Let me close a few tabs here. So this is a 11-minute video. We'll probably watch just like 5 minutes of it here. Not necessarily the whole thing. James O'Keefe. And here we go. Here, I'll read even his caption for starters. O'Keefe in talks to regain control of Project Veritas. Launches docuseries, The Truth Behind Veritas. Corruption, conflicts of interest, federal testimony, corruption and conflicts of interest. Federal testimony reveals Project Veritas board members who fired O'Keefe were co-investing in medical companies that could be sold to Pfizer. Mm-hmm.
But I did trust these guys.
A lot of people thought there was malfeasance. I would prefer to say ignorant of those events. I didn't want to know.
Nonprofit boards of directors
Okay, let me know.
can be very, very dangerous.
Fortunately, I have recordings and documents to back up everything I'm about to tell you.
Employees were starting to bundle up and talk.
If we're about to paint James as a criminal, it better be fucking good.
They sent a pic of me nailed to a
They
cross.
used these kids. Matt used them to further his agenda.
The reason why James was bad was morphing.
I never lived this lifestyle with black cards.
He's a mean boss.
I don't know that James has a private life.
James took a pregnant woman's sandwich. These are people that we thought were people with integrity.
Who on the board is in control?
Turns out board members are taking money from donors.
How much did you invest in each of Matt Tierman's companies?
I don't think that's any of your business.
We're at the pinnacle of Mount Everest.
Are you refusing to answer the question?
Yes.
The only thing that has changed is that we broke the biggest story in our organization's history.
If a board statement goes out, it's fucking over.
A week later, everything changed.
And it wasn't right.
It was the timing of it that was so suspicious.
Is it fair to say that 3 of the 4 companies you've invested in, you would consider to be in the medical field?
So what did the board think people were going to assume?
One of the companies could be sold to a big pharma.
Like Pfizer.
Like Pfizer.
Did the board not think that people were going to assume the worst? I want to talk about your investments.
I want to talk about you.
I'm a fighter.
You're a cheat.
I'm a warrior.
You're a liar.
And I will get my justice. Not revenge, but justice. Is it all about money?
Too bad you can't afford that.
Big difference.
Wow,
I'm
that's a
James
teaser.
O'Keefe, and I'm in talks to reacquire Project Veritas. It's no surprise that many in my audience have burning questions about what actually happened. Not a day goes by where I'm not at the gym, an airport, or a restaurant, and someone walks up to me and asks, "Hey, whatever happened between you and Project Veritas?"
What happened with him and Project Veritas?
What the heck is going on over at Project Veritas?
The rationale for him being thrown out of Project Veritas is absolutely unclear.
Now you're finally going to get the answer. Newly obtained deposition tapes in a lawsuit between myself and the organization I founded show board members of Project Veritas being in business together, co-investing in each other's medical companies.
How much did you invest in each of Matt Tierman's companies?
I don't think that's any of your business.
Are you refusing to answer the question?
Yes.
They admitted under oath the companies, quote, could be sold to a big pharmaceutical like Pfizer.
3 of the 4 companies you've invested in, you would consider to be in the medical field.
Heterogen could be sold to a big pharma.
Like Pfizer.
Like Pfizer.
And this was during the time of a string of hidden camera investigations that Project Veritas conducted into Pfizer, with an executive we caught on tape alleging Pfizer engaged in gain-of-function research.
The guy had a body cam and is talking to him, and the guy who works for Pfizer saying they've just had a meeting talking about how they could weaponize these other viruses.
Don't tell anyone. One of the things we're exploring is like, why don't we just mutate ourselves so we can create undeveloped develop new vaccines, right?
We recently discovered that Project Veritas board members and staffers weren't just in business together. They were soliciting money from donors to invest in these medical companies and did not disclose that conflict of interest with the rest of the Project Veritas team while they served on the board and signed a conflict of interest policy.
How do you define conflict of interest?
Oh, I don't know. Give me a dictionary and I'll read you the definition.
Now, I'm announcing an investigative docuseries into the board members who staged a coup and stole my own company out from underneath me, where we'll take you inside the extraordinary story of Project Veritas versus its founder, myself. This is a story so bizarre, it borders on the surreal. And when answers were provided, it just raised more questions.
When did you switch to wanting to harm James?
After James started claiming he was fired.
Julia Witt, an attorney working for Project Veritas, claimed that I stole a pregnant woman's sandwich at the Bob Creamer trial. The pregnant woman in question in this episode goes on record to deny this ever happened.
So I don't have any recollection of there ever being a sandwich that was meant for me that you took.
There were the complaints that I took a helicopter flight to see a donor in Maine. The donor, now identified as John Trainer in this episode, laughs at the helicopter flight being a problem and thought it was justified to save me time.
Well, I don't see anything wrong with taking the helicopter at all.
Or the senior executive, Barry Hinckley, he, him, who actually said, and this is recorded,
I ran a large company with a lot of employees, and I never lived this lifestyle with black cards constantly picking me up, moving me around, expensive accommodations when the rest of the staff was staying at one level. I mean, all for one and one for all, expected a nonprofit. I just never took the vision of one person living one way and everyone else living another way.
Some background. On February 10th, 2023, Project Veritas voted to fire me as CEO and chairman. I launched OMG a month later. They have awakened a sleeping giant. I'm back. Project Veritas then served a lawsuit against me in September of 2023 for breach of contract. Then, in the summer of 2024, Project Veritas brought us to federal court to try to get an emergency injunction to shut OMG down. Federal judge just now issuing a directed verdict against Project Veritas, and in my favor. Project Veritas lost, but continued to sue me. So I countersued for breach of contract, defamation, publication of my private facts, and intentional infliction of emotional distress for deliberately attempting to humiliate me. Finally, late last year, we at OMG were able to get the board members at Project Veritas to testify under oath on video, and we obtained damning internal emails that they never thought would see the light of day. Before we take you to the truth inside Veritas,
You want to leave it right there? What do you think? Is that enough?
Yeah, I think so.
Folks can visit James's Twitter page for the remainder of that video. It's about halfway through there. So
I was counting here how many times he said remdesivir and Jordan Walker. I got 0. I don't know, Mark, what you got. I don't know what you got, Aaron.
He made a reference to this event here that I have on screen, but he didn't exactly say it by name. So here's.
I didn't hear it. I didn't hear remdesivir.
No, definitely not remdesivir. No, he gain of function. Trying to be like Jordan Tristan Walker's all about gain of function. The whole thing. I won't play the audio on this. Everybody remembers it well, but. Well, the body language is all that really matters. Yeah, continue. Sorry.
Mark is correct here. The way they mutated coronavirus, and I'm talking about very small, subtle genetic changes. This is how a virus avoids your immune system. It changes its genetic code slightly to change the domain slightly. The way that happens is with remdesivir and the ventilator. That's how you increase by rebreathing your own virons. That's how you cause this. And we produce these studies. So this is why it's so important. It also, to Mark's point, answers the ventilator question. Why do they introduce the ventilators with remdesivir? And that's for directed evolution. And the directed evolution was you died in 5 days. And my key point here, and I think Mark's point was you die in 5 days, and those are the people that were removed from the study. The people who died on remdesivir were removed from the study. If you lived, right, then you had less hospital days, but you had to go all the way out to 15 days to see any kind of positive benefit. But what I'm saying is someone went in and took all the death and remove that. And I, we're watching this lawsuit here with Project Veritas about Jordan Walker, and we're seeing if any of this information is going to come out, or if Trump is going to be looking into this, or Bobby Kennedy is going to be looking into this. But this is the whole cabal. This is Cadillac. This is Rick Bright. This is Fauci. This is Fauci's boss. This is, it's everybody in the whole conspiracy in this thing. The same people that are in the DARPA conspiracy are in the remdesivir conspiracy.
I have one where, because I'm kind of getting up to speed on this, and that was Donald Rumsfeld's connection to this remdesivir. Because I guess early
Gilead,
on,
because Rumsfeld is Gilead.
Yep.
So what was the purpose of developing it then?
Well, I think it was HIV. It was to understand why T cells, look at T cells here, why are T cells going down in HIV patients? And you really don't understand that until the Northwell study. And as unbelievable as that sounds, that's the truth. And I've got the science right behind me. Is they kept throwing remdesivir at all these different things that cause cytokine storm to try to understand what downregulates these T cells. We see all these people. Remember, Rumsfeld's the one who writes the PEPFAR plan, the President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Relief. What's a military general writing PEPFAR for Reagan for? This goes all the way back to Reagan, Aaron, before you're born, or when you're a little kid, right?
Yeah.
Right. So he's been at this 40 years trying to come up with a thing for HIV. And what you want to do is you want to stop the virus for the shield, not the sword. But you got this, you got AIDS, you got HIV, so you got the sword. But the shield was going to be, hey, we'll block the virus from making more copies of itself. That's like locking down the copier. When the kids are playing with the copier too much, you lock down the copier. You have one of those key cards to use the copier, and then nobody could make copies because it loses the key cards. One of those Dilbert situations.
Mm-hmm.
That's what remdesivir was. It was to shut down the body from making things that weren't authorized, right? That were foreign to the body. And it's been, this thing in its various forms at Gilead has been knocked around for 40 years. Right, various instantiations of remdesivir. They're HIV drugs to start off with, and they're hepatitis drugs. Then these are blockbuster drugs, by the way, for Gilead, and then finally remdesivir. And they're still pushing remdesivir, and it's still the standard of care to this day.
I mean, this Romania study that I have here is the first thing that pops up. Sorry, I'm going to scroll a little bit here. Too much scrolling, but comparative study of cytokine storm treatment in patients with COVID-19 pneumonia using immunomodulators. And yeah, this is all about remdesivir, and 149 patients were treated with remdesivir and tocilizumab, and then 195 patients received remdesivir and anakinra is what this one is. But this is a study out of Romania that
Can you say what year that was, Aaron?
This
2020
was 2022.
2022. Okay, that was about the time I was there, so this wasn't available when I was in Romania. I don't think. I was in April, May, so I don't know when exactly this was published. I don't remember this when I was in Romania. But my point here is, this is one of those things where this isn't Harvard, this isn't Yale, this isn't Columbia, this isn't Princeton, where you're doing peer review and redoing the study. This is, I own you. You're a NATO country. You're about ready to get a shipment of a whole bunch of F-35s. So just keep that in mind when you're coming up with the effectiveness of remdesivir, right? So my point is that, and I haven't seen that study, so I don't know.
Yeah, we'll have to throw that one into the research here, but that's just for remdesivir and cytokine storms. Yeah, I mean, there is definitely, this is evidence that they were studying remdesivir as a solution for the cytokine storm that occurred with COVID and occurs in other situations.
And this is called, I'm sorry to get technical, this is called the STING pathway. They thought originally it was interferon was the thing that caused cancer. When interferon was first discovered, Judy Mikovits said that's what made her a doctor. They were pushing interferon. Interferon A is tested as one of the 5 things because they're still trying to figure out the STING pathway in Wuhan with Michael Callahan. And it's also interferon A is in the Jordan Walker study. They still haven't figured out the STING pathway, right? But once they understand how the STING pathway works, they got it. Now, 40 years of experimenting with various drugs from Gilead, they finally have the understanding of how the T cell regulation works. And T cell regulation works through cells called CHAT. And that stands for acetylcholine for T cells. And it's the same neurotransmitter. See this, even here in this article, you see Linfa Wang. You see Linfa Wang anywhere here? It should be in here.
I'm not sure she's in here, but just that this is, with pathway for cancer immunotherapy.
Okay, but Linfa Wang is the connective tissue here to the Australian labs, the Singapore labs, the Duke National University labs, the Wuhan labs, and also the Long Island labs, right, where all this is coming together. But you're trying to understand, okay, we have a situation where I put a sheet of music in front of the pianist, right? And 99 times out of 100, we get cacophonous response from the immune system. It's just a jumble. 20% of the immune system's T cells are activated. It's called a cytokine storm. Causes
just
all kinds of
the keys. It's not doing anything.
It's not
playing anything. Just smash
it's
all
not
the keys.
It's not a one note specific response is what you want. When you get some kind of adaptive immunity infection, what you want to pull out is that one note. It's actually 0.01% of your immune system. Not 1% of your immune system, 0.01% of your immune system. You want to pull out just that right T cell and then you want to amplify that T cell to fight the invader. This is the secret of cancer. This is the secret of HIV. This is the secret of any disease that's fought with T cells. Okay. So they're trying like mad to try and throw everything possible at all these Africans and all these Haitians and all these Eastern Europeans and sometimes U.S. military and sometimes sometimes poor people in Northwell, sometimes Nancy Haygood's monkeys, but they're trying to understand what makes this cacophonous response, this 20% response versus the specific response. We don't understand how the brain sends the signal and how it gets garbled in all of these diseases, not just HIV, not just cancer, not just Congo Crimea hemorrhagic fever, not just Ebola, not just hepatitis, not just sepsis, when you get septicemia and nothing, all of them, right? How does that work? We didn't understand that until the Northwell study. That's why doctors should be taking this course, because doctors don't understand T cell regulation. And interestingly enough, the one guy in the world who does understand T cell regulation really well, he's probably the top expert, is Dr. Sun Shang. And he's right there with when all the cancers start appearing, all the miscarriages start appearing, all the youth cancers start appearing. He's there with the one drug that does modify T cells. Right, that does actually, it is the right chemical messenger to modify T cells. So yeah, this is a lot of science here, and I'm not going to take everybody through all the science. But my point is Mark asked the $1 million question: what was this developed for to begin with? If it's being repurposed all these times, what was the initial thing that was developed for? HIV. Right, and they've been working on this. This is why it's a military thing. They haven't developed. They never figured it out until the Northwell study. And if you look at Kevin Tracy's the guy who runs Northwell Health. He's the CEO. He and a couple of other Northwell scientists are the ones that have the patent, the DARPA patent. They're a DARPA contractor. They have the patent here. So it's so huge. Northwell is so huge that I want James to return, because he brings 1 million people. I think he's got 2 million followers. He brings 1 million people to this. It's a complicated story. I'm not saying it isn't a complicated story, but it's one of the most important stories we've ever worked on.
Absolutely. I will. So we'll wind down here. We're reaching our hour. So sometimes we go 2 hours. Today we're going a little late. So we'll probably just do a little over an hour today, but, a few just other items in the news roundup. I think that's enough science for now.
Yeah. Right, and Kevin Tracy's born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. So
Oh, did you hear? We'll get him back on screen real fast. Just Kevin J. Tracy, neurosurgeon, inventor, president, CEO of the Feinstein Institute for Medical Research of Neurosurgery and Molecular Medicine at the Zucker School of Medicine, president of the El Mezzi Graduate School of Molecular Medicine in Manashit, New York, the Public Library of Science magazine. PLOS Biology recognized Tracy in 2019 as one of the most cited researchers in the world. So yeah, here he is. And yeah, born in Fort Wayne, Indiana. Awesome. So Soon Shang, you mentioned Soon Shang, and I just we're always watching Soon Shang and what him and Immunity Bio were doing, and I just thought it would be important for us to recognize that yesterday or 2 days ago, Soon Shang made an explicit shout out to Winber. And of course, our researchers and our research community is very familiar with the Chan Soon Shang Medical Research Center in Winber, Pennsylvania, but a lot of people aren't. This is certainly something that the new crowd who has learned about the very fascinating life of Dr. Pat Soon Shang through the Tucker Carlson interview was not necessarily aware of Winber Medical Center. So I'll just read here from Dr. Soon Shang. So proud of the staff and leadership at this wonderful little hospital supporting rural care in Pennsylvania. Congratulations to all. Also an important biorepository for cancer tissue in the nation. And don't we know all about that? But can you see it on screen there? Yeah, there it is.
Yeah.
So, shout out to Winber. I'm sure George will get back to Winber here soon enough before the snow flies. Winber is certainly a very important place, as Dr. Soon Shang is keen to make sure we all remember. I just thought I'd want to bring that to your attention, bring that to everybody's attention, that Winber is right there.
Well, I give Dr. Soon Shang credit when credit is due.
Yeah.
I'm all about saving as many lives as possible and having everybody understand the T cell regulation. Everyone, doctors don't understand this. This is all new discovery, right? So there is this there's this thing called a lymphocyte count, which is this aggregate lymphocyte count that counts T cells. Most of the things people concentrate on are two other little measures. One's eosinophils, the other is this neutrophils. They're really important early indicators. Those are your early warning indicators. But you're later into the infection, like 11 days, 10 days, etc. That is where T cells matter, and those are the diseases of cancer. Those are the diseases of hepatitis and sepsis. Kevin Murphy mentions sepsis. This is what happens in sepsis. Your body goes into septic shock, where it just says, "I don't know what the hell's going on," and it just lights up all the keys on the keyboard, and it causes inflammation. And the inflammation is what gives you the organ damage. And through the organ failure, you either end up on dialysis or you end up having a heart attack and dying. So this isn't just, this is MRSA. When you have the big reaction to MRSA, this is anaphylactic shock. When you have these huge reactions to people who have allergies, this is the secret of all. So Dr. Soon Shang has this fundamental understanding that 99% of most doctors don't. Right. And so what we need to do is not say, well, let's make the CIA insider that used all these experiments in China, let's make him richer. No. I want to take what they did secretly in China and secretly at the Winber lab and spread that out, that knowledge among all doctors, so all doctors can be better doctors. Right? You see the difference here is one, hey, we got a monopoly here, like Mark said, or hey, let's not have a monopoly. Let's have everybody have this information, right? And the Northwell study, that's why the Northwell study is so important. And it's not about traveling north to Maine well on a helicopter. That's not what the Northwell study is about. It's about a triple murder that unlocks medical. This is like Pasteur coming up with the germ theory. That's how big this is.
Were there a lot of patents involved in this murder? These people?
Well, yes, there's AI patent. She's got a predictive thing for breast cancer. She's running a chemotherapy site. This Crystal is running a chemotherapy site. She's got potentially this AI patent. We found another guy named Tim Talty, who was her husband. He's a supposedly a fruit bar, like salty fruit bar, but it's salty with a T.
Mm-hmm.
And then we found this other guy in Warren, Michigan, who works for DARPA with GM, and he's got hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of patents for RoboCop, DARPA type RoboCop. So that was interesting when we found that. It's like, where are all these patents coming from? But here's the fruit bar guy.
Well, I asked only, because maybe that explains the child being killed, because that would really like muddy the probate, and like who would end up with these patents and with these people being dead now. It would really,
right.
So this is a possibility that could have been that kind of a situation.
And this is about predicting breast cancer. She was an expert in predicting breast cancer using AI. It reminds me so much of Suchir Balaji when he's preparing this AI training drive, and he's with 4 Chinese experts for 4 days before, and then he dies, and then DeepSeek goes from last place to first place over the weekend, and everybody comes up with all these ideas of how they worked so much over the weekend to go from last place to first. The billionaires can't figure it out, but DeepSeek and a bunch of energy traders in China figured it out all in one weekend. They didn't use Suchir Balaji's drive. This is the same sort of thing. She's coming up with an AI way of seeing when somebody has breast cancer and seeing if the tumor is going to be malignant or if the tumor is going to be benign.
Certainly a woman who had a lot to live for, and that's I don't know. We won't dive too far into the postpartum depression. I could just say the word patent does show up 10 times here in George's most recent Substack about the great cancering introduction, cancer doctor, and baby murder with presidential endorsements, ? So yeah, it's definitely patents comes up a lot in here. There's a lot of patents involved. Absolutely. Just to switch gears almost entirely with another thing that's been in the news. This is not a news station or a research group where you're going to hear a lot about Diddy. There's a lot of places on the internet where you can learn about Diddy and talk about Diddy, but I did want to just throw in the one interesting story that I thought about with Diddy, which was on the bottom there, sent via BlackBerry. So it's like, I need some baby oil and Astroglide, God bless Diddy, right? But it's like they're all coming from Blackberries. They all had Blackberries, and it's almost like, who was it at the NSA or the CIA that was like, here, Diddy, just make sure anybody you talk to, you do it on this BlackBerry. You can do whatever you want, Diddy. We'll give you all the money. You can have all the parties you want. Just make sure that anybody you talk to, it better be on this BlackBerry, and we'll take it from there.
Well, I think, Carrie uses Blackberries to order the murder of Trump just a couple of days ago through the Haqqani network while he was in UAE. So Comey had a BlackBerry, the Haqqani network, Haqqani himself had a BlackBerry. He was in UAE with Trump at that time. So we want to call attention. This is why Bongino, by the way, and Kash Patel seemed to be hot on the trail of Clinton. All of a sudden they were doing nothing. They were kind of lost in the sauce and were overwhelmed. And now all of a sudden they're bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, like, oh, we got the juice. Trump tweets out about it, the Vince Foster murder and so forth.
That was very interesting recently. But just you heard it here first, folks. You heard it on George Webb's channel all those years ago before they canceled it. Blackberries matter. And I thought maybe we'd get a few people to come over to our side and jump into the research community with the Diddy stuff if we mentioned the Blackberries and how you were on the Blackberries way back when.
Well, there's no question I get more hits. I mean, I guess I should start taking helicopter trips to Maine and private jet trips to go pick up my donor checks. How much are the donor checks? If you can afford, I had a friend of mine who was a NetJet pilot. He said it was $20,000 an hour to operate these things.
Mm-hmm.
That's there and back at least $40,000. How much does the donor check have to be? If we get $4, we're excited, but a helicopter ride from New York to the tip of, up to the lab, the Rockefeller lab, what's the Bar Harbor?
Mm-hmm.
Back and forth, what's that gotta cost? I just can't even imagine to Bar Harbor and back what that costs.
Well, I see he mentioned Hinckley in the video. I mean, that's where Hinckley Yachts is, right? Hinckley makes his yachts up there.
It's where Rockefeller keeps his Hinckley yacht. Yeah, that's where David Rockefeller kept his Hinckley yacht. That Hinckley made yachts for David Rockefeller, Mr. Population reduction himself. So they had every reason. Barry Hinckley had every reason to support James O'Keefe. It's like it was like Kissinger could have written the check, but he got tired and he just said, Barry, why don't you write the checks?
Bush is at Kennebunkport.
Yeah, it's just a little bit north of Kennebunkport where George Bush was. And the only reason George Bush was a little south of Bar Harbor was because they wanted to do a lot of medical experiments right down there, a little bit south of there. So at the naval base, if you remember, when they were doing the first nuclear sub, I've been to that place. I think it's actually in New Hampshire in that little area, but it's halfway. I went to Kennebunkport and I sat in the restaurant where George Bush ordered. There it is out on the point, but where George Bush had his lobster. And the waiter came over and said, "Do you know whose chair you're sitting in?" I said, "George's chair. I'm George." He goes, "No, George Bush, H.W. Bush sits in that chair when he orders lobster." So, yeah, I think Ken Murphy, if you could just quickly show Ken Murphy's comments.
Oh, sure. Yeah. Okay.
He's showing clips from why this is a breakthrough. And believe me, I want to push this. He's talking about this vagus nerve that you see behind me. Is go back through all of them, if you would, and just real quickly put them up, because he's talking about what was actually discovered. If you don't have time, Aaron,
oh no, yeah, there's a lot of them here. I don't know how far I went back. I want to go. We'll start here. Mr. Green Jeans was asking PEPFAR, but then
President's Emergency Plan for AIDS Research, forwarded by a military general.
So let's see. Malone purposely refused to recommend hydroxychloroquine and ivermectin to promote the coronavirus vaccine development. He's a sneaky bastard. Northwell Health, specifically the Feinstein Institutes for Medical Research, has a research focus on T-cell biology and its implications for various diseases like AIDS, cancer, and autoimmune disorders. They study T-cell behavior to better understand how T-cells can be modulated to alter immune responses in these diseases. Northwell is actively involved in CAR cell therapy research and clinical trials, which involves genetically modifying T cells to target and kill cancer cells. Researchers are studying how T cells contribute to inflammation and organ damage during conditions like sepsis, and multisystem organ dysfunction, with the goal of improving patient outcomes. Northwell researchers have investigated the role of the vagus nerve in regulating T cell function, leading to the development of bioelectric medicine approaches for treating inflammatory conditions. Studies are underway to understand how T cells contribute to the development and progression of autoimmune diseases like lupus and multiple sclerosis. Northwell is participating in research and clinical trials exploring T-cell receptor gene therapy for solid tumors, including the first FDA-approved engineered cell therapy for synovial sarcoma. Feinstein Institutes, that's Northwell Research, finds new vagus nerve simulation method targets specific fibers, shows promise for improving therapeutic efficacy, and the study was featured in Nature, I think Nature magazine, Nature Communication there. Groundbreaking new method for vagus nerve stimulation, VNS, is a potential therapy for conditions including epilepsy, depression, heart failure, and rheumatoid arthritis.
Now that covers a lot of diseases, right? And that's a lot of people should know about this, because a lot of people have arthritis. A lot of people have synovial, the joint fluid, for lubricating the joint fluids. A lot of people have, they know people with lupus. So this HIV, etc., cancer, this is across the board right now. Because they were so sneaky, as our commenter says here about this whole thing, are they trying to take some kind of CIA gain of function research like DARPA adept in mRNA and sneak it through and say, oh, here's our Northwell researcher that came up with this? That's the juice here, is that there was a 20-year project in China, at least the last 10 years, for doing this gain of function research, which is great. It's great that science is moving forward. And they were also bringing in the Chinese folks into Winburg with Dr. Sun Xiong. I get that. That's great. They were also doing these experiments in Africa. I get that. That's great. I'm just saying it shouldn't be public money going here. It shouldn't be carved out for the elites. It should be spread. It shouldn't be patented. It should be spread across all doctors, and we should get reasonable treatments, not $30,000 a shot type treatments. But what I fear here is coming out of this is we have the patent now, like Mark said. That's the key. And now if you want our patent on how you talk to the immune system, you got to come to us, right?
Mm-hmm.
You're using our technology to stimulate the vagus nerve, et cetera. So that's, I don't know yet. We don't know yet. We don't have the answer.
Well, I think let's leave it right there. We got a few comments in. We don't need to do all the comments today. Yeah, a little over an hour. Thank you all for being here. Thank you for being in the comments. Mark, did you have any closing remarks? That's a lot. It's like, it's a lot to learn here in this research community. We never stop learning.
No, I learned a lot today, and it answered some questions too for me. So it's all good.
Fascinating.
That's a full bucket. That's a full bucket of slop right there. So
there you
go. Today was a double bucket. But
and George was up early. For folks who didn't see, I'm sure most of the folks watching here already saw your Twitter. But for folks who have not seen George's Twitter, he was up early this morning, like 6 a.m. his time, doing a big Twitter. 3 a.m. his time, doing a big Twitter video all about this information, and so we're just continuing to try to digest the research and information and get to the bottom of if there is somebody who may have killed the Calcetta daughter and granddaughter and grandfather. That is the question there. Are we dealing with a murder here?
James, come to the party. Come to the Northwell party, and forget about the helicopter to Bar Harbor and seeing Barry and the Rockefellers up there. Come to Michigan. Come to Michigan. And by the way, this is the thing. James there's only 2 citizen journalism institutes in the world.
Us and James, yeah.
Yeah, us and James. So we want to join forces. And we sleep we sleep on the floor.
Uh-huh.
So James, come on over. We'll put you up the Holiday Inn. We'll still be on the floor, but at least you'll have the Holiday Inn. We can't afford the Trump Hotel and the Ritz in Chicago, though. That's for sure.
Absolutely. So yeah, we'll leave it right there. If folks want to learn more, of course, George Webb's Substack. He has a number of series on his Substack. This is The Great Cancering. George Webb's Task Force Orange Journal is where you get all the information. You can support him there for $8 a month. And maybe we'll do a weekend show. We'll be in touch here in the next couple days. Maybe get a special event broadcast on the calendar here. And more to come from Neighborhood News. And of course, everybody can check George on his Twitter multiple times a day. So
are we back on Saturday?
Yeah, maybe we'll do Saturday. We'll see. We'll check. We'll check in a couple days. Try to get the Saturday Night Live going again.
If you want it, you got it. Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Thanks, guys.
Thank you all
Mark.
for being here, and we'll see you next time in Neighborhood News. There you go. For all the latest news and information from George Webb, you can check his information out at substack.com, georgewebb.substack.com, where you can support him for $8 a month.